Welcome to Storytime with Sam. Today we're reading a book called Annabelle Rose by Sarah McPherson, illustrated by Lucia, Benito. Oh, there's some colours there. I wonder what's going to happen. Annabelle Rose. Let's look inside and see. Magic is everywhere, the shopkeeper said to Annabelle Rose as she entered the store. She stood in front of a vibrant, colourful quilt that was covered in adventures with a princess in the centre. Annabelle Rose was enthralled. She knew no other quilt would do. The shopkeeper smiled and said, "This one is my favourite. You will have many adventures with this quilt." Her mum looked puzzled. "Adventures with a quilt? Well, I never." The shopkeeper smiled and said, "Just remember, magic is everywhere." See, Annabelle Rose had recently moved house and had been struggling to sleep in her new room. Her mum had decided that a new quilt might be a solution, but never expected talk of magic and adventures at bedtime. That night, as Annabelle Rose lay in bed, waiting for sleep to come, she heard a quiet, unassuming noise coming from the bottom of her bed. "Excuse me, miss, can you help me?" Annabelle Rose opened her eyes with a start and came face to face with the princess from her quilt. "How did you get here?" Annabelle cried, finally understanding the magic the shopkeeper had described. "Your quilt is an enchanted quilt, and our magical kingdom is in trouble. How can I help? Our colours are disappearing. Will you come with us and help us, please?" Annabelle looked at her quilt. She saw that it was losing colours fast. Annabelle looked back at the princess and nodded in agreement. She found herself transported right into her quilt, into a land of red, yellow and blue. She was greeted by an interesting old man, all covered in paint. "Welcome, I am Mr. Painter. It's my job to paint the whole kingdom and make sure everything looks right before the king and queen return home tomorrow, but I ordered the wrong colours." Annabelle peeked into her paint cans and smiled. "Don't worry, I know what to do." Mr. Painter handed over his paintbrush and Annabelle got to work. She mixed red and yellow to make orange. She mixed red and blue to make purple. She mixed blue and yellow to make green. "Oh, I never thought of mixing the colours," Mr. Painter cried. "But it's still not enough. The Queen's favourite colour is pink." Annabelle laughed. "Don't despair. That's my favourite too. Let me show you." She dipped Mr. Painter's brush into the red and white paints and then brushed a line of pink across the flowers. The princess smiled. "My mum will be so pleased. You saved us from trouble." By sunrise, the colours had all returned to the kingdom within the enchanted quilt. Annabelle Rose realised how tired she was. She yawned and closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was back in her bed. She looked down at her quilt that was now back to normal and wondered if it was all a dream. As she was thinking about her adventure, her mum wandered into her room and paused. "Annabelle Rose, why is there paint all over your hands?" Annabelle looked at her hands and smiled. "From mixing paints with a magical princess, I suppose." Her mum just laughed and said, "Oh me, oh my, oh Annabelle Rose." That was a great book. What sort of adventures do you get up to when you go to bed at night? Do you dream of magical castles?